So we've just seen Donald Trump's first address to a joint session of U.S. Congress. Donald Trump laying out much of his domestic foreign policy agenda for the United States, as well as recapping a lot of what his administration has been up to since it took office on January 20th. Joining us to give us a sense of Donald Trump, what he said in this speech, and what it means for the United States, both at home and abroad, is Ajay Bhutoria, a Democrat who serves as Deputy National Finance Chairman for the party. Mr. Bhutoria, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Could you begin by giving us a sense of what stood out to you from this marathon speech by Donald Trump, over 90 minutes, according to our estimate? What do you think were the key points that came across about Donald Trump and where he wants to take America?
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for having me. With egg and grocery prices soaring and rising up, and tariff wars going on with allies, U.S. allies, India, Canada, Mexico, and other countries, including China, and U.S. becoming a laughing stock on the world stage, Trump told his first big lie, which is America is back. If we were to look at today, his report highlighted aggressive tariff agenda and rocky foreign relationship. He boasted of slapping 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico and 20% on China, sparking trade war fears and price hikes. Even the cars, the economists are saying the car prices could, go jump around $12,000 higher in U.S., hitting the common, Americans. His clash with Ukraine president and Zelensky, and him talking about that in his speech, his shouting match in the Oval of Office last week, and that talks about how he's behaving with his allies, and he's getting de-alienated from the European allies. And Democrats champion cooperation, not confrontation, to protect both U.S. and global stability. If we look at U.S.-India relationship, which now faces strain under Trump's America First stance, highlighting in his speech today, he said that he vowed to tariff India at the same rate India taxes U.S. automobiles, potentially 100% or more. This could threaten potentially India's $50 billion in exports to U.S., like pharma and tech, and could trigger retaliation, raising costs for both the nation. We don't know. I mean, for as good as like common, people, Indian Americans living in U.S., what would be the impact on the groceries coming from India? We don't know that how the tariffs will impact. His past behavior on H-1B visa cuts and impacting that could impact 70% of recipients who are Indian, and green card delays. He basically introduced the new gold green card, which is 5 million or more, but that impacts cutting down the EB1 visa program, which was for investment visa from 500,000 to million. And a lot of Indians have invested in that program, and how that whole program will be, stopped, and how that impacts a lot of people who are in process. We have to see that. So overall, I would say that Trump's policies ripple globally, creating fear and breaking alliances and economic ties. And Canada's Prime Minister slammed the 25% tariff today as dumb and vowed to fight back. And China promised a bitter trade battle. And his Ukraine aid poses after clashing with Zelensky as Europe, coming together in support of Zelensky. And so all this is leading to isolation of America in general, coupled with potential economic trouble within the country. He did not talk at any stage. He did not talk about lowering the grocery prices or the egg prices in the country.
Right.
So,
If
so
Mr.
I
Bhutoria,
would feel.
if I could ask you this question, you said America is becoming more isolated on the world stage. I think some of us here in India have been struck by the fact that he announced tariffs on Mexico as well as Canada, and then of course the Canadian government has fired back with tariffs, and now you're set to see, according to the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, a trade deal as soon as tomorrow. So these tariffs lasted basically essentially a day or two, and of course caused major frictions in global markets, especially in the Indian market as well, where there was a decline in investor wealth. So a lot of people are saying that, look, what sort of foreign policy is this, where you essentially roil global markets for a day or two and then sign a deal that you were going to anyway? What do you think about the foreign policy or the thinking here on the Trump administration in terms of how they're approaching these questions?
I think the Trump administration and the Trump people are focused saying that being tough on the tariffs. His logic and his argument is that he's fighting against fentanyl drugs, and he wants China and Mexico to stop the drug supply, which I believe is good for the country, that less drug supply. But this is not the way to do that. A lot of cars are manufactured in Mexico. A lot of food products, like from tomato to potato to many things, most of the things comes from Mexico, and a lot of other items comes from including energy from Canada. So those will be impacted with the tariff, and who's going to pay? It's a direct sales increase of 20% sales tax, or on the common people who eventually will end up paying these prices. So Trump won the election. Democrats lost the election on the prices, on the economy, and that's what he's not fulfilling right now.
Could I also ask you a little bit about your party, the Democrats? Several representatives several Democratic politicians, House of Representatives members walked out either before or during Trump's address. Is it a symbol of how polarized American politics has become now?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, that happened during whenever Biden or Obama would give the speech, we would see the similar reaction from Republicans who would either protest or walk out, and we saw similar response from the Democrats. Some of the response I did not like it. They could have done it better. When a small child who was cancer survivor, everybody should respect that. But even, I mean, but it is very polarized, as you said. I mean, we are in two extreme ends of spectrum. The policies, whether dealing with uh, how Democrats were dealing with its foreign allies versus how Trump is dealing. He's looking to, get out of NATO. He has stopped funding to United Nations, and he has stopped all the U.S. aid to on all the humanitarian work. So these two policies are completely extreme, and that's polarized. And we are also seeing increase in racism against Indian Americans as well. There was an Indian nurse in Florida who was hit by a white man just because she is Indian. We saw the JD Vance, ignore one of the Dodge workers' comments that hate Indians. So we're seeing this rise of hate, racism, and polarization more and more in the country.
Could I also ask you a little bit about the economy? Donald Trump made a slew of different announcements. He talked about interest rates coming down. He said that, of course, he talked about investments. He talked about bringing back the golden age of America. But of course, it does also come at a time when Americans are increasingly concerned about the state of the economy. There's dropping consumer sentiment, as well as some real concerns that the US economy could be headed for a slowdown. Could you, because I know that you also had a career in business before this, and of course you also work with the Democratic Party on finance. Could you tell us a little bit about where the U.S. economy is right now? Are there serious concerns among the general public that in fact the economy could be headed for a slowdown?
The economy, what Obama laid down the policies, what Biden laid down the policies, and one of the highest number of job creation, and we are seeing that impact of that policies, had been going on. But if we look at when Trump took the office in 40 days back, and we look at the stock market today, all the gains has been washed away. The Dow, the S&P 500, they all have down by thousands or more point. So there's a fear in the market. I mean, they are not responding well to everything what Trump is doing and saying. The market is not reacting the same way. There are a lot of promises made, on the high level, $500 billion investment from AI and OpenAI and Larry Ellison, but his own team member Elon Musk questioned that, and he said that Sam Altman doesn't have that kind of money to make a statement, and he himself in a Twitter war said that that's a gimmick. So we have to see that these kind of false promises which are made, when the money investment is made and how many jobs are created in US, that has to be seen. But at the moment, what happens from April 4th is the impact of tariffs, which will be immediately visible on the supermarkets and grocery stores and cars and other products which the common man has to buy.
May I also ask you, Mr. Vitoria, about Donald Trump? He has defended the tariffs policy that he had. He said that, look, this will ultimately make America richer, but it will cause disturbance. But we know that markets and businesses have responded have panicked. We've seen, as you mentioned, the stock markets around the world really collapse. Do you really see this as an issue that your party, the Democrats, can use to put pressure on Donald Trump's administration and really connect with the American voters on the economy and say that, look, these policies are going to be ruinous to the American economy?
Absolutely. I mean, Democrats have promised to fight back and double down on Trump policies and fight for the agenda of the common people. Democrat wants this isolationism with lost innovation from immigration curbs, and so Democratic Party will continue to fight it down and seek collaboration for a shared prosperous future for all Americans, and they will continue to fight for this. I mean,
May I also ask you, though, there is a sense that, if I may also ask you about some other broader questions that Donald Trump has talked about. He's also talking about Ukraine, the Ukraine war. He's also talked about some controversial social questions in the United States, for example, diversity, equity, inclusion. Where does the Democratic Party stand on those issues now? Because Donald Trump has attacked it very strongly. DEI, he's saying we're cutting foreign aid grants for DEI projects, we're attacking it at home in our military. The Democrats are the party of diversity, equity, inclusion. And there was a sense in the 2024 election that this had actually hurt the Democratic Party, that it did, in fact, associate the party with a brand that was seen as too extreme on social issues. What do you think about that?
I think on that, I do agree with the Trump administration that cutting down on DEI and is the right thing to do. The Democratic Party has moved too far left on the woke culture, and our own voters do not believe that we were fighting for them. They did not believe that they did not believe into this woke issues of DEI or transgenders or men playing in women's sports, etc. I do not believe that the Democrat voters itself believed into that. So I guess that's a lot of most of Americans will agree on those things, and I think the wasteful cutting down on those spending is the right thing to do.
Right. Could I also ask you a little bit about Donald Trump's foreign policy? Now we all saw the showdown between President Zelensky and President Trump in the White House. Could you tell us what was some of the reaction among your party, among the people, among the voters you're in touch with? What was the general American public's reaction to seeing this real showdown between Donald Trump and Zelensky? Then the Americans, of course, went ahead and said that, look, we're going to pause military aid for Ukraine. Now, in this speech to the joint session of US Congress, Donald Trump has said that he's received a letter from President Zelensky, and he said that, look, we will try to get a quick resolution to the conflict. Where exactly do you think the American voters are on how Trump has handled Zelensky, how Trump has handled the Ukraine conflict, and how he should handle it going forward?
So when I was knocking doors in Pennsylvania during the general election, and most of the voters I met, they wanted the war to stop. They wanted America to stop giving aid to Ukraine and spend that money in US. So that was the most of the voters I met. They were, having the agenda that we should stop this money for Ukraine, bring and we should invest in diplomacy, not in war, and talk about peace. And so that was the agenda, and that's also Trump's agenda, where he won the election on that agenda. But the way the diplomacy has to any diplomat who has been knows that diplomacy is across in a table where there can be heated arguments, can be discussions, but you don't create a clown circus in front of media for the purpose of creating a circus and then have an invited guest to the head of a state who is a war leader, kick him, say that you have kicked him out of the White House. That's not diplomacy. That's basically people or media says that he's acting under the pressure of Putin or Russia, or is siding with Russia. If Trump wanted to have that deal with Zelensky, I'm sure he and Zelensky has a lot of points on disagreements, but those disagreements could have been sorted out by his team or Marco Rubio or other team members ahead of the meeting or after the meeting or during the meeting, and they could have continued the discussion. There was no need, I watched the whole 50 minutes of the meeting where Zelensky, though I do not like the way Zelensky is not for peace, but Zelensky did say thank you. He did express gratitude. He did express gratefulness. And I felt that JD Vance was trying to intentionally derail the whole discussion and then took the route to break it apart and so that they can have a different agenda. So I feel that as the only way to move forward is to have a peace talk where they should come together in all the different nations together and have a peace talk and bring this war to end. Nobody is interested in this long-term war where this war should continue with Russia.
Right. May I ask you one last question, Mr. Bhutoria, about the question of foreign policy? You mentioned very rightly that when you were out campaigning, lots of people said that they want the war to end. They're also going to look at what Donald Trump has done over the last couple of weeks and months, and they'll say, look, he threatened Panama, yes, his methods may not have been good, but we've just had an announcement very recently that BlackRock, the US private equity firm, may take over ownership of the two ports on both sides of the canal from a Chinese-owned company, which enhances US national security. He's moving quickly to end the Ukraine war and has received a $500 billion minerals deal. That's what the Trump administration, at least, is going to be saying. And he's also, for example, secured the release of Mark Fogel, the school teacher, from Russia. So a lot of people, some people may look at this and say that, look, Donald Trump's style may definitely be a problem, but on substance he delivers. So that will be the argument coming from supporters of Trump. How is your party going to respond, particularly because towards the end of the Biden administration, it really looked like the wheels had come off US foreign policy. There was a conflict in the Middle East, conflict in Ukraine, and increasingly a sense that US foreign policy had lost its way. How are you going to counter that criticism and the view of the Trump administration that actually Trump being tough and Trump threatening anyone to get what he wants actually produces results for US foreign policy?
Well, I mean, if any foreign policy expert today, even the Republican administration, many experts, they agreed that the investment made by Biden administration in Ukraine had weakened Russia. Russian army had lost a lot of its manpower and a lot of its strength. Even they are having now Chinese and North Korean fighters fighting on behalf of Russian army. So eventually, what Biden administration did weakened Russia, and that was an advantage of the investment of whatever number $180 billion US made had resulted in a weak Russia, and which eventually it was better for the world order where a weak Russia and countering China, which is one of the important thing of US policy right now, and that was the way US was dealing. Now, simply, and then we were also protecting our NATO allies and standing up for NATO allies against the bullies of Russia. Today, Trump has completely withdrawn out of Ukraine, and Ukraine deal and partnership is not. The NATO allies had a meeting with Macron, French President, Stemmer from UK, and everybody else in Europe, and standing with Ukraine to protect themselves. So, and we are in a fight with Canada. We are in a fight with Mexico. We want to take over Greenland by force. We want to take over Panama Canal by force. All these are hinting towards a potential war coming out in next few months or thing. Even though Trump says he's for peace, but all his actions are violent actions, bullying and threatening the neighbors and friendly countries, and without and building friendship with Russia. He's saying, yeah, is directing that Russia is a better than peaceful than Ukraine. So all those things are something doesn't align with the values of Democratic Party or our country, and we have to see in next few months how this plays out. I mean, and how the relationship changes in this dynamics.
Understood. Mr. Bhutoria, thank you so much for your time, for joining us here on India Today Global and explaining from your perspective as a Democrat, your perspective on Donald Trump and his first speech in front of a joint session of US Congress. Thank you so much again for your time. And thank you so much to our viewers for joining us here on India Today Global.